Welcome to The Future Ain't What It Used to Be, a series where we revisit 80s action movies that tried to predict the world of tomorrow and see how accurate they were. Not the flying cars, not the railguns, but the big stuff: power, media, culture, and politics. Each episode, I'll break down what these films got eerily right and where they completely missed the mark. The Running Man is peak 80s dystopian sci-fi. Neon lights, action on steroids, and satire as sharp as Sub-Zero's ice hockey stick. Set in the future of 2017, it follows Arnold Schwarzenegger as Ben Richards, a pilot framed for a massacre he refused to commit, and forced to fight for his life on the most popular game show. Yes, a game show where losing means certain death. After escaping from a labor prison, Richards is captured and forced to become a contestant on the government's #1 television program, The Running Man. The show is a brutal gladiator spectacle where convicted runners must fight for their lives against larger-than-life, heavily armed assassins known as stalkers. The charismatic but utterly ruthless host, Damon Killian, played with perfect sleaze by real-life game show host Richard Dawson, promises the winners a full pardon.
And who loves you? And who do you love? One more time. Yes!
While it delivers all the classic Arnold hallmarks, massive muscles, impossible odds, and unforgettable one-liners,
Here is Sub-Zero. Now, Plane Zero.
the film's legacy is far stranger, with elements of its satire becoming our reality.
Yeah, this is Killian. Get me the Justice Department, Entertainment Division.
What The Running Man got eerily right is entertainment as political pacification. In the film's version of 2017 to 2019, society doesn't rebel, not because it's unaware of its oppression, but because it's emotionally invested elsewhere. People are glued to a gladiatorial contest. They treat it as the primary cultural event of their lives, a source of identity and belonging. Now, here the film is tapping into an ancient dynamic: the reality that power doesn't always use sheer force to silence dissent. Sometimes it neutralizes it through spectacle. This isn't just cinematic exaggeration, there's historical precedent. In the late Roman Republic, inequality was rising, political instability was increasing, and civic life was strained. In response, Roman elites expanded public distributions of grain and massively funded spectacles, gladiatorial contests, and chariot races. The Roman satirist Juvenal famously criticized this dynamic with the phrase panem et circenses, bread and circuses. His argument wasn't that entertainment destroyed Rome, but that citizens were being politically pacified by having their basic needs met and their emotional appetites constantly stimulated. In both cases, The Running Man and Ancient Rome, civic frustration was redirected into ritualized spectacle. Now, fast forward to today. We don't separate news, politics, celebrity culture, and reality TV anymore. They all collapse into one continuous performance economy. Outrage equals attention. Attention equals profit. Profit equals power. Social media platforms and the 24/7 news cycles are engineered around emotional arousal, because strong emotion keeps people watching, it keeps them scrolling, it keeps them reacting. You don't just consume content, you feel it. And this is where The Running Man feels uncomfortably prophetic. In the film, the public isn't passive, they're emotionally invested, cheering, outraged, captivated, but most importantly, distracted all at once. That's not dystopian fantasy, that's the attention economy. But what happens when politics is overcome by the same dynamic? Well, it becomes performance too. In many Western liberal democracies, political discourse increasingly resembles media spectacle. Politicians are evaluated by performance. Viral moments outweigh legislative detail. Think about the game show host in The Running Man: slick, charming, and adored. His authority comes from his popularity, not his morality. Does that sound familiar? When charisma equals credibility and politics becomes theatre, well, institutions don't necessarily collapse overnight. They erode gradually. Checks and balances weaken, not because they're formally dismantled, although sometimes they are, but because attention shifts away from them. Good governance becomes background noise in the context of the political circus. And here's the crucial point: entertainment doesn't cause authoritarianism, but when political life becomes saturated by spectacle, well, more serious critique can become less appealing, and often complex truths become dominated by simple narratives. In that type of environment, a populist figure who can master spectacle can gain disproportionate influence. Media ecosystems that reward outrage can divide a community and even a nation. And people become emotionally exhausted, but perpetually stimulated. In this world, in our world, power doesn't always need to crush dissent. Sometimes it just needs to outcompete it. And this matters because The Running Man wasn't about future technology. It understood something deeply about power and psychology. It understood that when spectacle becomes the dominant language of our lives, a society can drift towards authoritarianism, not because people are stupid, but because they are emotionally saturated and exhausted. And this perhaps is The Running Man's most unsettling prophecy. What The Running Man also got eerily right, well, not completely, but I'll unpack that in a moment, wasn't just its take on reality TV. It was this: whoever controls the narrative controls the public. And once you control the public, you don't need tanks in the street. In The Running Man, the government edits footage to frame Ben Richard as a mass murderer. They fabricate evidence, they broadcast a version of reality that millions accept without question. The public cheers his imminent execution because they've been shown a story that makes it feel justified. The regime controls the network controls the narrative controls the masses. It's blunt, it's exaggerated, but the underlying insight is uncomfortably accurate. Now, we don't live in a one network dystopia. This is where The Running Man missed the mark, but I'll expand on that in the next section. We live in a hyper network ecosystem made up of 24/7 news, social media, influencers, and political commentators. Control doesn't emanate from one authoritarian broadcast tower. Instead, it's about how things are framed and who has the power to construct the frame. In the cases of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, government representatives quickly launched into a scripted response because the first framing often sets the emotional tone. And once that tone spreads, it's hard to reverse.
This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers.
The agents attempted to disarm the individual, but he violently resisted.
This individual attacked those officers, wishing to inflict harm on these officers, coming brandishing like that.
Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers, a Border Patrol agent fired defensive shots. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement.
Committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Today, we don't usually see fabricated state broadcasts. Instead, we see competitive framing. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Corrections rarely travel as far as first impressions. And here's where this matters politically. Authoritarianism in modern liberal democracies rarely arrives as obvious dictatorship. It drifts. It grows in environments where shared reality fragments, trust collapses, and emotional narratives overpower deliberation. When citizens can't agree on basic facts, democratic institutions weaken, not because dissent is banned, but because consensus becomes impossible. The film imagines a single centralized media machine shaping public perception. One broadcaster, one narrative, one control room. Reality, however, is far messier. Modern media isn't unified, it's personalized and networked. Algorithms don't push one message to everyone, They feed each user more of what they already engage with. You and your neighbor can live on the same street, yet inhabit completely different informational realities. That's not centralized propaganda, that's algorithmic siloing. During the 2016 US elections, fake accounts didn't amplify one side. Rather, they inflamed both sides. State and non state actors seeded content through influencers, meme pages, and bot networks, often with a grassroots aesthetic. Now, the purpose behind this grassroots aesthetic was to conceal the sophistication and the coordination that sat behind these programs. It wasn't one voice, rather, it was a swarm of voices. One of the biggest things The Running Man got wrong was the assumption that citizens are passive consumers. We aren't. In reality, we share unverified claims. We remix clips, we create commentary channels, and we produce memes. Misinformation isn't always imposed from above. It's also socially reproduced. There's no single evil network. There's a participatory information ecosystem. And in some ways, that's harder to resist because there's no single control room to overthrow. It might not be high art, but The Running Man is a wildly entertaining time capsule. It's a movie that perfectly captures the excess of the 1980s while somehow holding up a mirror to the 2020s. It's cheesy, it's violent, and it's packed with memorable one-liners.
How about the light?
So, how did the film go in predicting the future? Well, it was prophetic about power. It understood that spectacle can pacify civic frustration by redirecting emotional energy into entertainment, and that politics, when absorbed into the same performance economy, becomes theatre rather than governance. It recognized that authority increasingly flows from popularity, that outrage outcompetes nuance, and that whoever frames the narrative first often shapes public reality. In a world saturated by spectacle and fragmented media ecosystems, dissent doesn't always need to be crushed. It can simply be distracted, reframed, or emotionally outpaced. That psychological insight, not the sci fi, is the film's most unsettling prediction. Where The Running Man miscalculated was in imagining control as centralized. Instead of one evil network, we inhabit algorithmic silos, where personalized feeds create parallel realities, and influence spreads, not from a single tower, but through swarms of influencers, bots, meme pages, and ordinary users. Most significantly, the film assumed the public merely consumes propaganda. In truth, we help reproduce and circulate it, which makes it harder to detect, harder to challenge, and far more resilient than the movie ever imagined. So the real danger isn't universal brainwashing, as The Running Man predicted. It is the erosion of our shared reality. Enough fragmentation to stall collective action, enough polarization to keep us fighting against one another, and enough mistrust to weaken our institutions. The problem isn't that we're mindless, although some of us may be, it's that we're divided and pitted against each other. So, how did The Running Man go in predicting the future? Well, I'm giving it 2 out of 4 yellow jumpsuits. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments which 80s movie you'd like me to do next. Take care.